What have you been hearing?
Yeah, there's actually been a lot going on. I've been really lucky. I've been here all week. So I started off my week by hosting Rejects. Rejects had some fantastic talks. There wasn't really a common theme there other than you can see that people are starting to mature much more in their Kubernetes adoption. The use cases that people have in terms of trying to troubleshoot are much more advanced than that they were. It's no longer a matter of having a 101 track of how to get things deployed. People now have things deployed and they're having totally different usage issues. So very cool, very diverse talks going on at Rejects as always. It was a great event. I spent some time at Colos on Tuesday. I was on a panel about eBPF use cases. That was a very interesting event as well going on eBPF Day. Some very cool use cases. Also, a lot of people who are starting to use eBPF for other things, not just network security. So very cool to hear how people are starting to use that and interact with the kernel to understand the underlying processes of what's going on and how that's being interpreted into other aspects of cloud. Spent a little bit of time at ArgoCon as well. People have a lot to say about the new tooling that's coming out, how to use the different Argo tool sets. So that was also very interesting. And then obviously platform engineering is everywhere. Everyone wants to talk about platform. That is what people are talking about. Platform engineers at everybody's booth all day long. What can you offer me as a platform engineer? So very cool to see that starting to mature and gel as well.
That's a quick overview of RunMe and all the sort of things that the service that you guys offer.
Yeah, absolutely. So for people that have not heard about RunMe before, it's essentially a technology. It's open source project actually that takes Markdown documentation. So any Markdown file that you open, it turns into a runnable notebook. And for those of you who used Jupyter before, you're probably very familiar with that. So any code block inside of your notebook or inside of your Markdown file becomes a cell with a play button. And essentially, it's very simple. You can run your documentation that way. When you save it, you change it and save it, it just becomes Markdown, right? So it's indistinguishable, which means you're not closing the door behind you. You can use RunMe, get the benefit of running your documentation, but you can also incrementally convince people that that is the way to go, which it is. So that's a very basic idea. We spend a lot of time, making it like more specifically useful for infrastructure and cloud interactions. So you can also inline cloud resources, copy VM, like the URL from the cloud console in AWS, drop it into a cell, click the play button, and it shows you the UI, that you otherwise would see in the console. So the idea is also kind of like to bring people into the documentation and keep them there and let them do their work there, instead of having to switch between, editor, terminal, browser, console, back and forth, and copy and paste in between. And and that's kind of like sort of the baseline functionality. There's a lot more, you can run it in different places. It's VS Code native, but it's built on the platform of VS Code, so you can run in code spaces. Yep, self-hosted. And on the product side, what we're currently working on is just adding team features. So you can securely, save and share and troubleshoot. And the latest thing that we've built for this conference is an AI. And the way it works is that your notebooks learn from you. So as you use them, you're essentially providing human feedback to the documentation that you're working with, and it can learn from that. And then instead of starting with a pre-written documentation document that you're looking at as a notebook, you can just tell in the notebook what you want to do, and it will generate sort of the next steps in the process. From the learning part of using a notebook, it will learn like your namespace conventions, how you call your services, right? So it really kind of like takes the best of the LLM, that it knows how to use, kubectl, for example, right? But it also contextualizes it for your internal infrastructure, because not everyone names their namespaces the same way, right? So that's kind of like the rundown of the technology and
what's exciting you the most about 2025 when it comes to WASM, and what can we expect to see in this space?
So I think there are like several layers where interesting things happen in the most recent, let's say, past that continue to the present and obviously may need some time in the near-term future. So starting on a language level, I would say we are really looking forward to get .NET compiled down to WebAssembly using WASI P2. So there's a lot of work going on in Redmond to make that happen, and we were also contributing to those efforts to get another, major language that is so popular among application developers to fully embrace WebAssembly as a compilation target in that sense. And if we look at the standardization, we have with Spin, for example, just released 3.0, where we embrace those standards like, for example, WASI KV, also WASI key value, and WASI config, which is sort of laying the foundation for WASI Cloud Core, which is super interesting and appealing to me personally, because this is basically like let's say, the set of interfaces or with words in WebAssembly terms, right? That one could implement differently depending on the given environment. So for example, if you, let's say, think about Microsoft and Azure, right? Yeah. They may have a different way of providing you key value capabilities as, let's say, AWS or GCP may have. But for me as a developer, my app doesn't have to care that much about their cloud-specific ways of handling things. All I want to do is maybe read and write data to and from the key value store, right? So just imagine like the idea of me taking my app and moving it from one cloud vendor to another cloud vendor, or maybe down to my on-premise Kubernetes cluster, running a platform like, for example, Spin, without needing to change code at all. That's just something that I think our industry is like looking for years, if not decades right now. And I'm really looking forward to see this becoming a real thing now.
That GitLab has built in a number of tools for value stream analysis, right? So that you can see and measure the results of your work, right? Because, technology is cool, right? But cool tech doesn't make an impact on your business, right? What makes an impact on your business, are you delivering the features? Are you delivering the stability? Are you seeing things begin to trend in a positive way or in a negative way? Are you able to start burning down that iceberg of vulnerabilities that exists in your environment, or is it continuing to grow, right? So GitLab has a lot of tooling to allow platform teams to share that information with the relevant business leaders so that they can start making good judgments. And, in my mind, there's very little that's more fundamental to a platform engineering practice than being able to make a hypothesis, test, and measure, right? That plan, do, check, act cycle is so critical. And there's a lot of tooling in there that enables it. We're always talking about GitLab Duo, the new AI assistant that we built in. So there's stuff there that can help accelerate different parts of the dev cycle, right? But I think the really exciting things are, in my mind, right, from a platform engineer perspective, what is coming in, what's come in CI/CD components, and what exists in that platform to allow you to demonstrate to your leadership, I've made an impact, right? It's one thing to say, oh, look, I wrote this cool thing.
My God, what's going on? I don't need another ecosystem for the WASM, just for the WASM specific technology, and it's bring technologies that work particularly for the WASM. Now we see there's a Spin framework, Spin Cube is coming up. What's happening in the WASM is how this relate to what's happening in containers.
Okay, so I think that WASM made a terrible mistake early on. They're thinking that, okay, they can adopt some other ecosystem or they can build their own ecosystem. That is not going to happen. Simply because Kubernetes itself is so big that anybody trying to replicate at this moment in time a parallel ecosystem to Kubernetes that's not going to work, right? Because yeah, Wasm is great. I think it's amazing, but we still need somehow to manage networking. We still need to manage storage. We still need to do a bunch of other things, just as we do a bunch of other things around containers. And the only reasonable place to run Wasm, from my perspective, is Kubernetes. All those previous attempts, like, oh, we're going to run it on Nomad, that sounds very silly to me, right? Eventually, Kubernetes will be replaced by something else, but it is highly unlikely that Wasm has the power to replace Kubernetes, right? And if you cannot do that, you need to work inside. And so, really, to me, the main obstacle to adopting Wasm is that, hey, if I'm going to change my containers to Wasm, don't ask me to change everything. Just like I can just replace my containers in my Kubernetes cluster with Wasm, and I need to have reasonable guarantees that everything else that I have around will work.
So, sorry. Yeah, I think it's 3,000 is the number.
3,000.
Okay.
Richard, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so, and in terms of sort of customers getting used to these tools and adopting them, what's that been like? Has it been easy to kind of work on these types of tools and things like Backstage versus kind of how they were doing things in the past? With maybe doing that manually or using other tools. What's kind of the how easy has it been for customers to adopt it?
So how easy is adoption of Backstage? How have people experience? Yeah. So it really depends on the existing organization. So Backstage, it brings together your platform or your engineering really and aligns your organization. So if your organization is already quite aligned, it can be a fairly smooth process to kind of get up and running. If there's work to do on the engineering organization, it can be a very long journey in that case. But it's not really about Backstage adoption at that point. Right? It's realigning your engineering process.
Backstage allows them to organize that. The other big feature is be able to standardize the sort of building of services. Often organizations, when you need, as an engineer, you need to create a new service, you go copy an existing one and rename a bunch of things. You can use the software templates and Scaffolder to standardize that so you get a consistent result from it. So those are the two big things that we often see Backstage being used for. I would say some of the new exciting things going on in the Backstage world is the community plugins repo. We have 80 plugins in that repo. We're working with Red Hat and several other organizations building that out. So that's been really awesome. That started in April of this year, but it's still pretty fresh and seeing a lot of activity. There's a really cool Copilot plugin that someone contributed. So I'd definitely go check that out if that's something that interests you. And then I think the other big thing that we're doing is making it easier to build and deploy Backstage by making it so that you don't have to write nearly as much.
So I from Microx, sandbox project, fully dedicated to API mocking and testing, tool for developers mainly, but used by a lot of, let's say, big adopters and enterprises. So check your adopter list. It's quite public, and it showcases, let's say, how important the tool is used and used at scale, let's say, with hundreds and hundreds of developers. Used to streamline the development lifecycle process by mocking and simulating API on all dependencies to speed up development. And last but not least, test everything when it's up and running on QA or in production to ensure that you don't never introduce any breaking changes depending on the API version. So cool stuff to check.
That's like the best elevator pitch that I've seen yet today.
I have a question. So Florian, I know you guys are kind of doing a little bit more around sort of AI at the moment. What's kind of some of the latest Dell solutions around AI and generative AI?
Oh, that's a good one. So we have this whole pitch about the AI factory, which is kind of co-engineered hardware or component with NVIDIA. So huge story around super fast storage to be able to process unstructured data in parallel, NVIDIA GPU, Power Edge servers. And so that's the big thing, AI factory. So go Google AI factory Dell. And myself, I work a lot with Red Hat OpenShift. And with OpenShift AI, you have also kind of nice stuff with integrated pipelines and whole ecosystem to kickstart and with your AI development. So that's yeah, in a nutshell.
You're doing really well though, Colin. You're learning on the fly. You're learning on the fly.
That could be fun. Hey, oh, we got somebody. We got somebody. There you go. This is CloudNative Podcast. We got the Cloud Therapist, and we've got Sam here.
Oh, awesome.
So we're live on YouTube. Okay,
great.
That's big. It's a lot of pressure. But
okay.
Can you tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah,
and then we'll go into. We want to ask some questions about Red Hat and learn about how you contribute to the CNCF and how we can find you. Feel for yourself.
Yeah. So hey, I'm Grant Shipley. I'm a senior director at Red Hat, and I am responsible for AI stuff that we have going on now. And so I was actually at the first KubeCon ever 10 years ago. There was about 3 people there, and I was one of them. So yeah, always been a huge fan of the CNCF.
That's awesome. Richard, Sam, any questions?
Yeah. Let me start. What is sort of Red Hat doing in the AI space? I've seen demos of sort of Ansible where you kind of had AI as part of the code creation. So you were kind of putting in a prompt and it would generate the code for you. Where else are you kind of seeing AI coming into your solutions?
So it's really hard to hear, but I think it's kind of where do we see AI coming into solutions and maybe in the open source world as well, maybe something like that. So one of the things that we announced today, I didn't actually see it, so hopefully we announced it, is the donation of most of our container tools to the CNCF, including Podman and Podman Desktop.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah, and so inside of Podman Desktop, we have what's called an AI lab, which is a pure open source way just for people to get started with artificial intelligence. And when I say that, I mean adding it into their own applications where it makes sense. I think right now as an industry, we're struggling because AI is the buzzword and everything has AI attached to it, but finding some true value in it and making it useful for people, we'll figure that out over the next couple years or so. We'll figure out the predominant use cases. We're also doing work on the new DRA stuff, so you can take a GPU if you have it on a node in your cluster, and for lack of a better word, shard that GPU out so it can be at capacity most of the time. Do an automatic discovery of GPUs. Think of LSPCI on Linux, but doing that in a Kubernetes cluster to really make it easier if you do want to run accelerated workloads to take advantage of those GPUs. So we're doing a lot of stuff. Also with, KubeRay and all that stuff, integrating that into like a AI platform as well. So tons of stuff going on right now. But again, we're trying to find a use case for the great technology.
Before we're wrapping up, it's your time to recap the KubeCon so far, what you have learned, what your experience, and now your commitment for doing it again for ourselves in the near future in a bunch of other conferences as well. So you need to recap.
Yeah, this KubeCon has been great. The energy here is better than it has been in years past, which is awesome. Not saying it was bad, but we were all recovering from COVID as this conference grew back up again. So it's the KubeCons of old. It's been a lot of fun. A lot of great people here. Everyone's so welcoming, accepting, right? Making everything accessible for everybody. But the amount of progress and projects that we're seeing is tremendous. You saw that with the keynote on the increase of the number of projects. We got a lot of new working groups forming and standards and finding all kinds of new ways for people to contribute. So it's amazing to see all the different activities here in the conference. And man, I can't think of a better place to be as far as, a conference you can go to that isn't a t-shirt convention is actually a place that you can go learn, right? Grow, meet some people, do something practical and meaningful and impactful, just like the NVIDIA guys said that, their company tries to do. So thank you guys for giving me the chance to hang out with you guys while I get to experience this in person. I just wish you were here. So maybe next time we all do it in person.
Kind of giving whoever's been watching and whoever's watching this as a replay, it's kind of giving them a flavor of kind of what to expect at KubeCon and specifically what happened at KubeCon in Salt Lake City as well. Thank you to all our guests. Thank you to Colin specifically for kind of being our roving reporter for the last couple of days, which was fantastic of him. Really appreciate him spending the time with us, and it's been wonderful to actually get to know him throughout the last couple of days as well. And thank you as well, Saim. It's been wonderful to co-host this with you. As you said, we will do a bit of a recap maybe at some point. We'll certainly, I think, tease out some of the the interviews and questions that we've had. I think there's lots of material there that we can go back to and maybe tease some of that out and kind of focus on those points a little bit more.